Hello, I'm Mark Benison, and in this episode I'll be looking at GitHub Desktop, using it with Unity. So version control, there are many version control systems, and the most famous is arguably GitHub, owned by Microsoft. We use GitHub, or more specifically GitHub Desktop. Visual Studio, incidentally, has some great integration with GitHub natively built into it, without having to use the desktop app. And if I'm doing Visual Studio based projects, I actually prefer to use that. However, for Unity projects, and for those new to version control, I do think the GitHub Desktop app works very nicely. It doesn't have the full control that you would have doing things command line, but again, if you're starting out, it's a good place to start. GitHub, or version control in general, takes a bit of getting used to with their own terminology and a process for creating or duplicating repos, which are folders, and committing changes locally before manually then pushing them up to the server. And I'm going to try and cover some of this. So just some quick terms. A repo is a repository, and a repository is a folder which is going to contain all your files for a single project, sort of the parent folder. Commit is when you want to log changes to a repo. That's when you go into any changes that have been made to a project. When you want to log those, you commit them, and you do that typically locally on the machine, PC. Pull is to copy the commits that have been made to the server online, and you want to copy those down and pull those down onto your local repository, onto your local machine. And push goes the other way. It's when you've got those commits on your PC and you want to push them up to your server. Typically, the GitHub server must be synchronized. Sync or synchronize to the local repository to match the server, so the server and the local are the same. Now, I'm not going to go into branch, pull requests, and merge in this video, but just to give you an idea of what they are, branching is when you create a fork of a repo. That is to say, you split it off. So you split off from the master or the main branch, and you can create sort of little pathways to follow, and it works really well for teams and things. And if you're doing a branch, you have to have pull requests to merge the branch back with the parent. It gets a little bit more complicated, and if you know, for the purpose of what we're doing today, we're looking at really if you're using this more as an individual, and it's more about keeping a backup. And then history, you can go through all your commits, and that's the whole point of version control. If you've made a mistake at some point, you can go back and see what happened, or you can go back and even revert to a previous version of what you had. So it's important to have regular commits and keep them small and manageable. So how to create a repo from a current project? Well, first and foremost, you're going to need to create a GitHub account. So go to github.com and do that. Secondly, I'm going to ask that you download and run GitHub Desktop. Once you've done that, let's assume that you've created a new project on your PC in Unity. You've got a project that exists and it is a folder, but it's not considered to be a GitHub repo yet. So we're going to create a new repository for that folder. So in GitHub Desktop, you can go to File and New Repository, or Control N, and then you will get a little window pop up and you can name project. And now you need to give that the same name as whatever the folder is called, whatever your project is basically called. If I store my projects in a folder called Unity Projects, and you can see that in my local path there, then if that's where this project is saved, and if the project name was, in this case, mb_navflight, then I give it the exact same name. You can give it a description, that's optional. I prefer to give a little description, and it makes me remember what these things are. And then again, the local path, that is the parent root folder, if you like, for where the folder resides. Where is it? And if you note, that doesn't say mb_navflight in the local path. Typically, I like to initialize them with a readme file. Whether I use them or not, it just puts it there ready. I like to select a Unity from the git ignore, which I'll come on to, and I tend to leave licenses none, but it depends what you're doing. If it's just a little project that you're working on by yourself, it's not really relevant at this point. And again, that git ignored, what that's important for is it's which files will be ignored when uploading to the server. And depending on the kind of solution that you're uploading, depending on what files you need and what files you don't, by selecting Unity from the drop-down list, pre-configured to know what it doesn't need. And that's important, and we'll try and come on to that in a bit as well. Now, once you've set that up, your folder now is a repo. And before we do anything else, we can click on the Show in Explorer to have a look at that. And a typical Unity project will have your assets library log, object, packages, project settings, all those will be there. What weren't then, what will be there now are the git attributes and git ignore, and assuming you selected a readme, then there'll be a readme there too. They'll be added to the folder, and you want to go into that folder, make sure they're there, make sure that they're in the same place as the assets in the library. If you've not selected the parent directory at the location correctly, then it might not show up in the right place. So it's always worth checking this now, and if these are in the wrong place, you might have to delete them and start again, basically. So that's the purpose for checking this out, checking your file structure. Now, these, well, what this has done is this has made a repo out of our project, but it's a local repo. It's on our machine. It doesn't exist anywhere else. Our machine gets destroyed. We don't have our files anymore. We now need to publish our repository through GitHub Desktop, and first time you do this, it'll want to confirm certain details. And again, the name and description are all pulled in from that. You might just want to check to keep this code private if it's not something you want to share. However, if if you're a student and you're making a few games, you probably do want to have them public so that you can share them with prospective employers and things. I wouldn't worry about people stealing your ideas at this point. You know, you're in a learning curve part of your development. Anyway, you publish it. And once you've published it, you have then the option to view it on GitHub as well. So you wanted to go and check in on that. You get something that looks like this, and you can see that you've got your initial commit, your first commit. It'll tell you how many minutes ago it was last changed. Obviously, that'll update. And you'll notice, actually, as much as we have the git attributes, git ignore, and readme, we've only got assets, projects, settings, and packages in the list. We don't have the obj folder, and I think there was another one we missed. And that's because git ignore realizes we don't need it. You mostly need assets and project settings, and any folder, any Unity project can typically be reconstituted from those two folders, even without any other files around it. Assets and project settings, you can rebuild your Unity package. And so that's all Unity uploads. And what that means is instead of uploading over 100 gig as a new project, you can be uploading a lot less. If you make any changes then to Unity in your Unity solution, maybe add something, remove something, whatever it might be, you'll see that you'll get this sort of list of changes, which is on the left-hand side above the bit I've highlighted in yellow. And when you've made some changes, it's often worth coming in and putting a git commit message, which is what you see near my face. So I've said I've removed some golden spheres from the scene, and that's the main title, if you like, and that's what you're going to see in your list of history, which is you want it short, succinct, but descriptive. And then you can add a description to add a little bit more context around that too. And if I've got bugs and things that are still evident, I sometimes write those into my description so I can refer back and know what bugs I'm looking at. And you want to commit those to your master, so you need to commit to master to commit those changes so they're logged. Now I do this whenever I've done a sort of major update. So if maybe I've implemented a certain kind of movement mechanic on my player, that's a good time to commit. It might be that I've added a new weapon, I might want to commit those. But even if you're just working between sites, it might be that you're just committing wherever you're up to at home, and then you're coming into university and using the computers there, and you want to be able to pull down from the server, so you need to make sure you've committed it. So that's the idea. But of course, committing it only keeps it on your local machine. So if you commit the changes all at home, when you come to uni, you can't see those changes. So before you do anything else, you then need to push those back up to the origin, push those to the master. So there's this line that you make changes, you come in here, you commit those changes, and then you push to origin. You can also go into history, and you'll be able to see a list of your commits, as mentioned. So you can see I had my initial commit, and above that the removed golden spheres. I did a game object, and then I merged a pull request because I was playing around with a few different things. And again, this is what it'll look like on GitHub, where you can actually view all these, and you actually download the project as it was at each of those stages, so it keeps a running track of where things are at. You can actually download a repo from the server. So if you've done this as a project, maybe you started it at, let's say you started at university, you created it, you've set it up on GitHub, so now it's a repo on GitHub, if local folders a repo, you can then come home and go, well, I don't have it now, and I don't want to create a new project. The idea is you want to clone what's on the server. So you go to File and Clone Repository from GitHub Desktop, and then select from the list your project that you want and choose a suitable local path to store it in. Hit clone. Take a while to download those files and open them all up, and there you'll have it. Thank you very much. You may like to take a look at my other videos or subscribe to be notified of future content.